Welcome to the AddVANCEO Podcast, the space dedicated to developing sustainably talents, potential, and motivation in individuals, teams, and organizations. Today, we are delighted to welcome you to episode number 6 of this series. In this episode, we explore a powerful coaching framework coming from transactional analysis. The 3P model: permission, protection, and power. A model that helps coaches, managers, and leaders unlock the full potential of individuals and teams.
Yeah, and it's such a vital topic.
It really is. So, stepping into our deep dive today, we're really talking directly to you out there, whether you are a leader, a manager, a coach, or, just someone trying to understand how to bring out the absolute best in the people around you.
Absolutely.
We've got this fascinating set of notes focused on the 3P model. And the reason these three dimensions are so utterly essential is because the ultimate goal of any coaching or leadership relationship isn't just, it's not just getting a task done to meet a quarterly quota. Right?
No, definitely not. It's about moving the individual toward true autonomy.
Exactly. It's about building sustainable performance and what the sources call ontological security.
Which is a very heavy academic phrase.
Right. Highly academic. But it basically describes a deep, unshakable sense of safety in who you are and what you do. When your team has that, they aren't constantly looking over their shoulders. And the 3P model acts as the core architecture to build exactly that environment.
And I think that structural aspect is what makes the research we're looking at today so compelling. We aren't just dealing with high-level abstract theory here. This is a highly practical toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the author of our source material refers to it as one of the arcana of coaching.
The arcana. I like that.
Yeah, like this foundational, almost secret knowledge that makes human development actually work. It focuses on building progress step by step, but doing it in the way that directly involves the person you're guiding. You are co-constructing their solutions with them.
You're not just a mechanic fixing a broken machine.
Precisely. You are building the psychological environment where they can elevate themselves.
Okay, let's unpack this, because permission, protection, and power sounds fantastic on paper. Almost like the title of a corporate action movie.
It really does.
But we really need to know what these look like in a messy, everyday workplace. So let's establish the baseline definitions.
We can start with permission. Essentially, this is the coach or leader saying, yes, it's an explicit authorization you give to the person to think differently, to feel their actual emotions, and most importantly, to drop their limiting beliefs.
Okay.
It's giving them the green light to act or react in a new way.
That's right.
And to finally let go of the rigid operational habits that are, holding them back.
Right. So it is not just letting them do whatever they want. It's giving them the explicit authorization to stop doing things the way they've always been done.
Exactly. Now, the second P is protection. If permission is saying yes, protection is saying no.
But a good no, right.
A profoundly benevolent no. It's the safety net provided by the manager. It protects the individual so they can take those new risks safely and accurately measure the consequences of their choices without blowing up their career or their team's project or the company's bottom line.
So if we look at a classic workplace scenario, you give them the permission to get behind the wheel and drive the car.
Right.
But the protection is the seatbelt you make them wear and the empty parking lot you let them practice in before hitting the highway.
That is a very accurate way to visualize it. And that combination brings us to the third P, power. Or, in the original French text of our sources, puissance.
Puissance.
Yes. This is the magical result of the first two. When you perfectly calibrate that permission to explore and that protection from catastrophic failure, you unlock the person's full potential.
They access their true power.
Exactly. Which massively reinforces their self-confidence and that ontological security we mentioned at the start.
But where is the psychological foundation for this coming from? Because it feels very rooted in human behavior, not just standard corporate management theory.
It is deeply psychological. The 3P model has its roots in transactional analysis, which examines the different ego states we all operate within.
Okay, ego states.
Yeah, and the 3Ps map onto those states directly. So protection comes from what transactional analysis calls the normative parent, that part of us that sets rules, frames things, and establishes necessary limits.
Got it.
And that normative parent speaks directly to the adult state in the person you are managing, which is the part of them that deals with reality, logic, and external constraints.
I get the psychological theory there, but let me push back for a second. In a high-stakes corporate environment, doesn't using terms like normative parent and free child risk sounding a bit patronizing?
I can see how it sounds that way.
Right, like how do we apply permission without babying our highly capable teams.
That is a crucial distinction to make. We aren't talking about treating your employees like literal children. We are talking about recognizing the psychological reality of how human beings process authority and creativity. The nurturing parent state, which is where permission comes from, is simply the part of a leader that encourages change and risk-taking.
Okay.
It speaks to the free child ego state in the employee, and the free child isn't an infant. It's the absolute center of their creativity, their drive, and their authentic personality.
So you need that nurturing state to coax out their most innovative ideas.
Yes, but you also need the normative state to deal with the adult's reality so the project doesn't go off the rails. It is a constant negotiation.
That reframes it perfectly. It's less about parenting and more about balancing innovation with reality. And speaking of reality, managing people is never a one-size-fits-all scenario.
Never.
Our notes highlight this concept called the autonomy dial, or cadran de l'autonomie. It basically argues that a leader has to constantly shift their 3 Ps depending on where an employee sits on this dial.
It is an incredibly useful framework because it acknowledges that autonomy isn't a switch you just flip on. It's a spectrum. We start at degree 0 on the dial, which is dependence. This is someone who is highly submissive. They avoid conflict. They adhere to whatever you say immediately, and they really struggle to use the word I. They are completely dependent on external direction.
We have all managed this person. It's the terrified new hire who CCs you on every single email, or the chronic yes man who refuses to make a decision without your signature.
We've all been there.
So how do the 3 Ps apply to them?
For degree 0, the primary permission you need to give them is dare to say no. You have to actively authorize them to disagree with you.
Wow, okay.
And the protection you offer while they try that out is benchmarking. You tell them to do what others do for now. You give them a template so they feel completely safe while they practice finding their own voice and asserting their opinions.
That makes a lot of sense. But then we move to degree 3, which the sources call counterdependence, the rebel.
Ah, the rebel.
Let's play this out for a second. I am managing someone who opposes everything. Every new software rollout, every process change, every strategy pivot, they fight it. As a manager, my instinct is to ask, why shouldn't I just put them on a performance improvement plan or let them go?
It is a totally natural managerial instinct to want to crush the rebellion. But psychologically, counterdependence is actually a step up from degree 0.
Really?
Yes, they are finally starting to assert that I, even if it's currently taking the form of hostility toward the oppressor, which unfortunately is you.
Great.
So your permission here is to actually welcome their anger. You help them understand its origin and let them express it safely.
So I just let them vent?
Not without a boundary. That is where protection comes in. Your boundary is making them evaluate the actual gains of this behavior. You protect them by asking, okay, you are fighting this new process, but what is it actually getting you? How is this resistance serving your career?
You force them to analyze the utility of their rebellion rather than just shutting it down.
Exactly.
Which naturally leads us to where we actually want people to be on this dial. Looking at the research, that is degree 3 interdependence. This is the sweet spot. The person is highly capable and strong, but they are also vulnerable enough to express their needs. They operate in a state of free choice.
So if they are operating at that high level, what do you think their permission and protection look like?
Well, based on the notes, it seems the permission here is allowing them to accept both that strength and that vulnerability. It's authorizing top performers to admit they need help, which is surprisingly hard for high achievers to do.
It really is.
And the protection is helping them evaluate their gains, negotiate for what they need, and deliberately focus on improving their quality of life. You are basically protecting your best people from burning themselves out.
That is spot on. But the dial doesn't stop there. There is a degree V return to dependence. Think about the broader arc of a career. Degree V is often a senior leader who has been promoted and suddenly has to learn how to delegate. They have to accept being taken care of by others.
That's a huge shift.
It is. The permission you, as perhaps their executive coach, must give them is to actively mourn the loss of being the super competent, do-it-all person.
Oh, we all know that manager. The one who still tries to format the client PowerPoint deck themselves at 2 a.m. because they just cannot let go of being the hero who fixes every problem.
Exactly. They are terrified of losing their value. So the protection you provide is shifting their entire focus. You show them that their new role, their new metric for success, is to grow others. They are protected by finding deep value in developing their collaborators rather than executing every task themselves.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because all of this growth, moving from a terrified new hire to an interdependent professional to a senior leader, requires a massive shift in how a person sees themselves. The source material uses this absolutely beautiful metaphor from a thinker named Vincent Lenhart. He states, "The potential butterfly does not realize it lives in a caterpillar's skin."
It is a stunning visual, and it captures the essence of coaching perfectly. The source breaks this down into 4 different skins, or pew, that a person wears in the workplace.
Okay, 4 skins.
Each skin represents an area where a person might have experienced professional trauma, or where their development might be stuck like a scratched record. To help the butterfly emerge, a coach has to provide targeted recognition across these 4 skins.
So let's ground this. What does the first one, the person's skin, actually look like on a Tuesday morning in the office?
The person's skin is all about internal recognition and self-awareness. On a Tuesday morning, this is the employee who is terrified to speak up in a brainstorming session because they don't feel inherently valued as a human being.
That's tough.
It is. Your permission here isn't about praising their job skills. It is authorizing them to assert themselves and validating their inherent worth. The protection is providing them with consistent, genuine signs of recognition just for being part of the team.
Then we have the training skin. This one shifts to external recognition, specifically regarding their choices and their learning.
Yes. The permission here is actively encouraging them to explore new options and legitimizing their desire to learn new skills. But the protection is vital. You must help them evaluate what they actually gain from these new options, keeping them grounded so they don't just endlessly chase certifications without applying them.
Carrying that caterpillar metaphor forward, we hit the profession or experience skin. When we talk about this skin, we are essentially talking about a caterpillar who is incredibly good at crawling.
Right.
Your job as a leader isn't to micromanage them into being the absolute fastest crawler. It's giving them the permission to realize they actually have the capacity to fly while giving them the protection of a safe space to test their new wings.
I think that captures the dynamic beautifully. It is about validating their existing know-how, but giving them the authorization to leverage that experience into entirely new, unexplored avenues. You protect them by assessing the risks of those new avenues together.
And the final skin is the status or referee's skin. This one fascinated me because it deals directly with the realities of corporate power and authority.
This is the external recognition of their status within a system. When someone gets a major promotion, the permission a leader gives is crucial. You must dare the person to actually express and exploit the power the new status provides for their own development and the team's benefit. Many newly promoted leaders are paralyzed by their new authority.
But absolute power corrupts, absolutely, right? So what is the safety valve here?
The protection for the status skin is anchoring their power to a specific, outward-facing responsibility. You essentially tell them, use your power, flex your authority, but your absolute boundary is that you must use it to help others grow. It protects them from becoming a workplace tyrant.
Now, when you move from calibrating the caterpillar skins of one single person to managing an entire department, the dynamics change entirely. Those same 3 Ps have to work against complex group fears. How does this model scale up to team coaching?
In team coaching, the definition of power shifts slightly. Team power means getting the group to think for themselves without constantly seeking the boss's approval for every minor pivot.
That's the dream.
It means they actually take pleasure in cooperating, showing up authentically, and taking collective responsibility. To achieve this, the source material introduces Wilschutz's ICO model to explain how the 3 Ps overcome the 3 primal fears that destroy team cohesion, inclusion, control, and openness.
The first hurdle is obviously inclusion. The underlying fear there is the fear of being ignored, the fear that you simply aren't important to the group.
Yes.
The permission a leader gives here is actively welcoming the person and giving public positive feedback so they feel seen. But how do you protect them? You can't just flatter everyone all day to make them feel included.
The protection against the fear of being ignored has to be structural. It is drafting a team charter of shared values. It is guaranteeing confidentiality during sensitive discussions. It is strictly enforcing rules like ensuring everyone is heard in meetings without being interrupted. You build a protective fence of processes that practically guarantees their inclusion.
It makes sense that inclusion is the first hurdle. But once people feel included, human nature kicks in. Suddenly, everyone wants to steer the ship, which brings up an entirely new fear, the fear of not being competent enough to hold the wheel. That is the control phase.
Exactly. The fear underlying control is the fear of being humiliated, the fear that you will step up and fail publicly. The permission here is explicitly recognizing the person as a high-potential member of the team. You authorize them to take the reins.
And when they do step up, you protect them by taking their inputs seriously. You integrate their ideas into the team's actual progress so their contributions are actively valued, not mocked or dismissed. Which leads us to the final part of the ICO model, openness.
The fear here is perhaps the most primal of all, the fear of being rejected. The fear that you aren't worthy of being liked by your peers. The 3 Ps are used here to deeply recognize that the person is fundamentally worthy and has inherent value. This allows them to open up entirely to the rest of the team without the lingering dread of ostracization.
And to tie all these diverse, occasionally fearful individuals together, our notes briefly highlight this brilliant concept of the ECM, the minimum cultural envelope.
Yes, the ECM.
It is basically the idea that for a team to function as a single body driven by the same energy, they need a shared binder. That binder is made up of shared values, shared goals, shared experiences, and a common language. If that envelope is weak or non-existent, the team will eventually fall apart, no matter how much 3P coaching you do.
The minimum cultural envelope is the container itself. The 3 Ps are simply the tools you use to strengthen and develop the people operating inside that container. Without the envelope, the energy just dissipates into the void.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? You have the theories, you have the models. How do you actually implement this tomorrow morning without accidentally messing up your team's dynamic?
This brings us to what the source beautifully calls the master's balance. This is the true art of coaching and leadership. There are 2 critical balances a leader must maintain, or the entire framework collapses. Balance 1 is the equilibrium between permission and protection. It requires a highly subtle dosage.
Let's visualize that dosage. If you give a ton of permission, go innovate, disrupt the market, do whatever you want, but very little protection. The person's energy is completely wasted and scattered. It is like telling someone to paint a masterpiece, but giving them no canvas and no edges. They just throw paint everywhere and eventually get paralyzed by the infinite choices.
That is a perfect analogy. Conversely, if the protection is way higher than the permission, meaning you give them a million rules, stringent benchmarks, and endless safety nets, but very little actual authorization to act in that, their energy is muzzled. It gets knotted up internally. They feel stifled, micromanaged, and ultimately they disengage.
That brings us to balance, to stakes versus power. And this one speaks directly to the ambitious listeners out there. The sources highlight the gravest trap in all of coaching: having a personal project for the coachee.
Oh, yes.
We have all done it. You hire someone smart, and you secretly want them to solve the problem the exact way you would. You want to clone your own success in them.
It is the ultimate ego trap for a manager. You are projecting your own agenda onto their development. The balance requires you to deeply understand the stakes of the corporate environment, but always remember that the ultimate goal is the coachee's true power and autonomy, not your personal vision of who they should be. As a leader, you are there to help build their house, not to remodel their house into a miniature version of yours.
That is a tough pill to swallow for high-achieving managers. Before we wrap up, our sources have a great list busting some common myths about these concepts that we should clarify. First, protection is not a medieval suit of armor.
No, it's not.
It does not mean nothing bad will ever happen to your team, and it is not a panacea against all mistakes.
Furthermore, the text explicitly states that protection is not a fireproof door you hide behind to block out the other person's emotions or their messy professional history. It is a boundary created for safety and growth, not a concrete wall built for avoidance.
And on the flip side, permission is not just letting everything go. It is not a free-for-all where accountability disappears. And it is certainly not the opposite of authority. True permission can only be granted by someone who holds a legitimate, authoritative space in the first place.
Exactly.
If we step back and look at the whole picture, the core value of this deep dive into the 3P model is really about environment design. It is realizing that your fundamental job as a leader isn't to forcefully extract performance from people. It is to create an environment where a perfect, subtle balance of boundaries and encouragement allows an individual's true power to emerge naturally.
That's it, exactly.
And remember, there is absolutely no need to put up protections where none are needed. Don't over-engineer your management style, because ultimately, permission only has weight and only truly exists because of the protection that makes it safe for your people to act on it.
That synthesis captures the heart of the framework perfectly. And before we close today, I want to leave you, the listener with a final thought to mull over, building on that beautiful butterfly metaphor we discussed earlier. Before you can expertly calibrate the exact permissions and protections for your team, you have to take a hard look in the mirror.
Oh, a challenge.
Yes. You have to ask yourself, which of the four skins are you currently wearing? Are you secretly operating in a state of counterdependence, fighting your own superiors, while simultaneously trying to lead your team toward interdependence? Because the harsh reality of leadership is this: you cannot accurately give permission to others to take off their caterpillar skin if you haven't yet recognized your own.
That is a profoundly challenging question to take into your next one-on-one or team meeting. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into human development and transactional analysis. We wish you incredible success in taking the permission, protection, and power framework and applying it to build true sustainable autonomy in your own organizations. Until next time.